Prophecies and Revelations by Saint Bridget of Sweden. Book 3, Chapter 5. Ambrose's words to Saint Bridget of Sweden about the prayer of good persons for the people. Rulers of the world and the church are compared to helmsmen, while pride and the rest of the vices are compared to storms, and the passage into truth is compared to a haven. Also, about Saint Bridget's spiritual calling. Chapter 5. It is written that the friends of God once cried out asking God to rend the heavens and come down to free his people of Israel. In these days, too, God's friends cry out, saying, "Kindest God, we see innumerable people perishing in perilous storms, for their helmsmen are greedy, and are always desirous of putting to land in those countries where they think they will get a greater profit. They lead the people toward places where there is tremendous hurling of the waves, while the people themselves do not know any safe haven. So this countless people is therefore in awful peril, and very few of them ever reach their proper haven. We beg you, King of all glory, graciously light up the haven, so that your people may escape their danger, not having to obey the wicked helmsman, but being led to the haven by your blessed light." By these helmsmen, I mean all those who wield either material or spiritual power in the world. Many of them love their own will so much that they do not bother themselves about the needs of the souls under them or about the fierce storms of the world, since they are of their own free will caught up in the storms of pride, greed, and impurity. The wretched populace imitates their deeds, thinking that they are on a straight course. In this way, the rulers bring themselves and their subjects to perdition by following their every selfish desire. By the haven, I mean the passageway to truth. For many people, this passageway has grown so dark that when someone describes for them how to get to the haven of their celestial fatherland by way of the sacred gospel of Christ, then they call him a liar, and instead follow the ways of those who wallow in each and every sin, rather than trusting in the words of those who preach the gospel truth. By the light requested by the friends of God, I mean a divine revelation made in the world in order that God's love might be renewed in human hearts and in his justice not be forgotten or neglected. Therefore, because of his mercy and the prayers of his friends, it has pleased God to call you in the Holy Spirit in order that you may spiritually see, hear, and understand, so that you may reveal to others that which you hear in the Spirit according to the will of God. Ambrose's words to Saint Bridget of Sweden, offering an allegory about a man, his wife, and his housemaid, and about how this adulterer symbolizes a wicked bishop, while his wife symbolizes the church, and his housemaid the love of this world, and about the harsh sentence on those who are more attached to the world than to the church. Chapter 6. I am Bishop Ambrose. I am appearing to you and speaking with you in allegory, because your heart is unable to receive a spiritual message without some physical comparison. Once there was a man whose lawfully wedded wife was charming and prudent. However, he liked the housemaid better than his wife. This had 3 consequences. The first is that the words and gestures of the housemaid delighted him more than those of his wife. The second is that he dressed the housemaid up in fine clothes, without caring that his wife was dressed in common rags. The third is that he was accustomed to spending 9 hours with the housemaid and only the 10th hour with his wife. He spent the first hour at the housemaid's side, enjoying himself in gazing on her beauty. He spent the 2nd hour sleeping in her arms. He spent the 3rd hour cheerfully doing manual labor for the sake of the housemaid's comfort. He spent the 4th hour taking physical rest with her after his physical toil. He spent the 5th hour restless in his mind and worrying about how to provide for her. He spent the 6th hour at rest with her, seeing now that she fully approved of what he had done for her. At the 7th hour the fire of carnal lust entered into him. He spent the 8th hour satisfying his willful lust with her. In the 9th hour he neglected certain tasks that he nevertheless would have liked to carry out. He spent the 10th hour doing some tasks that he did not feel like doing. And only during this hour did he stay with his wife. One of his wife's relatives came to the adulterer and reproached him strongly, saying, "Turn the affection of your mind toward your lawfully wedded wife. Love her and clothe her as is fitting, and spend 9 hours with her, and only the 10th hour with the housemaid. If not, beware, because you will die a horrible and sudden death." By this adulterer I refer to someone who holds the office of bishop, for the sake of providing for the church, but, in spite of that, leads an adulterous life. He is joined to the Holy Church in spiritual union, so that she should be his dearest bride. But he withdraws his affections from her, and loves the servile world much more than his noble lady and bride. Thus, he does 3 things. First, he rejoices more in the fraudulent adulation of the world than in an obedient disposition toward the Holy Church. Second, he loves worldly decorations, but cares little about the lack of material or spiritual decoration of the Church. Third, he spends 9 hours on the world, and only 1 of 10 on the Holy Church. Accordingly, he spends the 1st hour in good cheer, gazing on the beauty of the world with delight. He spends the 2nd hour sleeping sweetly in the arms of the world, that is, amid its high fortifications and vigilance of its armies, happily confident in possessing physical security because of these things. He spends the 3rd hour cheerfully doing manual labor for the sake of the worldly advantage in order that he might obtain the physical enjoyment of the world. He spends the 4th hour gladly taking physical rest after his physical toil, now that he has sufficient means. He spends the 5th hour restless in his mind in different ways, worrying about how he can appear to be wise in worldly matters. During the 6th hour, he experiences an agreeable restfulness of mind, seeing that worldly people everywhere approve of what he has done. In the 7th hour, he hears and sees worldly pleasures, and readily opens his lust for them. This causes a fire to burn impatiently and intolerably in his heart. In the 8th hour, he carries out in act what before had merely been his burning desire. During the 9th hour, he negligently omits certain tasks he had wanted to do for worldly motives, so as not to offend those for whom he has a mere natural affection. In the 10th hour, he cheerlessly performs a few good deeds, afraid that he might be held in scorn, and again a bad reputation, or receive a harsh sentence if for some reason he wholly neglected to do them. He is accustomed to spending only this 10th hour with the Holy Church, doing what good he does not out of love but out of fear. He is, of course, afraid of the punishment of the fires of hell. If he could live forever in physical comfort and with plenty of worldly possessions, he would not care about losing the happiness of heaven. Therefore, I swear by that God who has no beginning and who lives without end, and affirm with certainty that, unless he returns to the Holy Church soon, and spends 9 hours with her, and only the 10th with the housemaid, that is, with the world, not by loving it, but by possessing the wealth and honor of his episcopal office with reluctance, and arranging everything in humility and reasonably for the glory of God. Then the spiritual wound in his soul will be as grave as, to make a physical comparison, the wound of a man struck so horribly on his head that his whole body is destroyed down to the soles of his feet, with his veins and muscles bursting, and his bones getting shattered, and the marrow flowing out terribly in all directions. As harshly tormented as seems the heart in a body struck so violently in its head, and the parts of the body closest to the head, that the very soles of its feet are in pain, although they are at the farthest remove, equally harshly tortured will that miserable soul closest to the blast of divine justice appear, when, in its conscience, it sees itself being unbearably wounded on every side. The Virgin's words to Saint Bridget of Sweden, comparing a world-loving bishop to a bellows full of air, or to a snail lying in filth, and about the sentence dealt out to such a bishop who is the very opposite of Bishop Ambrose. Chapter 7. Scripture says, "He who loves his own soul in this world will lose it." Now this bishop loved his own soul with his every desire, and there were no spiritual inclinations in his heart. He might well be compared to an air-filled bellows next to a forge. Just as there is air left in the bellows once the coals are spent and the red-hot metal is flowing, so too, although this man has given his nature everything it craves, uselessly wasting his time, the same inclinations are still left in him, like the air in the bellows. His will is inclined to worldly pride and lust. Because of these vices, he offers an excuse and a sinful example to people with hardened hearts who, wasted in sins, are flushed down to hell. This was not the attitude of the good Bishop Ambrose. His heart was filled with God's will. He ate and slept with temperance. He expelled the desire for sin, and spent his time usefully and morally. He might well be called a bellows of virtue. He healed the wounds of sin with words of truth. He inflamed those who had grown cold in God's love by the example of his own good works. He cooled those who were burning with sinful desire by the purity of his life. In this way, he helped many people to avoid entering the death of hell, for divine love remained in him as long as he lived. This bishop, on the other hand, is like a snail that reclines in its native filth and drags its head on the ground. In similar fashion, this man reclines and has his delight in sinful abomination, letting his mind be drawn to worldliness rather than to the thought of eternity. I would have him reflect on three things. First, the way in which he has exercised his priestly ministry. Second, the meaning of that gospel phrase, "They have sheep's clothing, but are ravenous wolves on the inside." Third, the reason why his heart burns for temporal things, but is cold toward the Creator of all things. Welcome to the Virgo Potens YouTube channel. If you enjoy this video, give it a like. I also invite you to subscribe to this channel so that you won't miss new content. Please prayerfully consider supporting my work by becoming a patron of Virgo Potens on Patreon and/or by buying one of my books. My ebooks are available on Amazon as well as on the Apple Bookstore. For those who prefer a physical copy rather than an ebook, my book, Spiritual Warfare, Know Thy Enemy, is also available as a paperback on Amazon. If you are interested in making a one-time contribution, I suggest that you do so by simply buying one of my books. I am thankful for your support. Links to Patreon and to my books will be posted in the comments section of this video. The continuation of this work isn't possible without you. Lastly, and most importantly, please pray for me. May the Virgin Most Powerful guide and protect you.